All right, let's go ahead and get started. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to the 40th Annual Statewide Disability Legislative Reception, zooming in on disability funding and 40 years of advocacy. I'm Shelby Sotko, the Executive Director for the Washington State Rehabilitation Council and the chair of tonight's event. I'm wearing a black shirt and sweater with short, light brown hair with gray and blonde highlights, wearing blue glasses against a blue background with our yellow event logo. In 1980, the first legislative reception was coordinated by the organization now known as the Governor's Committee for Disability Issues and Employment. Over time, as the event grew, the Developmental Disabilities Council and the ARC of Washington State took on a larger role in coordination. Today, the ARC of Washington State continues to sync this event with the kickoff of their advocacy days. Can you go to slide 2, Courtney? Our event partnerships continue to expand to include Allies in Advocacy, the Community Employment Alliance, Office of Deaf and Hard of Hearing, People First of Washington, Self Advocates in Leadership, Washington State Independent Living Council, and Washington State Rehabilitation Council. Over the years, this event has been held in Olympia area hotels, the third floor of the Legislative Building, the Columbia Room in the State Capitol, and now due to COVID-19 health-related concerns, we have the opportunity to bring this event to you virtually to allow an accessible format with statewide participation. The Planning Committee wants to acknowledge that we are all missing the opportunity to see our friends, colleagues, and legislators in person. While we can't see who's all in the room, there were 453 registered participants for this event, representing every legislative district except for one. That is so cool. And we also have 35 legislators that were registered for this event. Our goal this evening is to inform you about cross-disability legislative priorities for this session from the voice of presenters with lived experience in the following areas: transportation, affordable housing, employment, residential supports, community access, behavioral health, and personal care. A sincere thanks to the members of the Planning Committee for their dedication to ensuring this is a successful event. And most importantly, to our legislators who have carved out the time during their busy legislative session schedule to attend, listen to our priorities, and respond to our questions. Thanks to each of you for attending too. We hope that you enjoy the program. Next, I would like to introduce you to Courtney Williams with the Community Employment Alliance, who will share a few Zoom basics to optimize your experience tonight. Thanks again for being with us.
Thank you, Shelby. Welcome, everybody. So thank you so much for bearing with us in the beginning, but we are troubleshooting. This is a learning experience for all of us. And just a reminder, we are people running something that is completely new to us. And so showing us some grace would be so appreciative. We have a wonderful presentation today. So I just wanted to make sure we are all on the same page in terms of what you can expect. So your microphones are muted. And your cameras are turned off. That's normal. You're not going to be able to see anybody else, just the panel. We are recording this webinar and we're going to share it after the event. In fact, you should get an email after this event with that link. You can access the live captioning by clicking on the caption at the bottom of your screen. Questions can be posted in the question and answer box, which will be monitored by our tech team. So just reiterating the question and answer box. So there's a Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Go ahead and type your questions relevant to this presentation in that chat box. If there's anything you need, so if you're experiencing technical difficulties or you have a question that you might be having challenges asking, you can call or text me. My number is 360-830-8613. I'm going to put it in the chat box for easily so you can reference it later. And then just because we want to make sure that we are accommodating everybody and everybody can have a experience full of resources and information, one person speaking at a time, I want to show you a little bit about when someone is speaking, what you would want to do. So I'm going to say I'm Courtney Williams. I am wearing a pink sweater. I have glasses, my hair is down, and my background you will see is blue. We're going to use respectful language, and we're going to use plain language to avoid any confusion. Okay. Now I'm going to introduce Diana Staden, who's going to go over priorities.
Thanks, Christy. Yeah, so we're going to start first. I want to introduce myself. I'm Diana Staden, and I'm the Advocacy and Policy Specialist for the Arc of Washington State. I'm a white woman in my 60s with short hair, short blonde hair. I'm wearing a blue top with matching blue glasses, and I have a dark blue background behind me with the oval yellow logo for this event. So we're going to start with the topic of transportation. Since many people with disabilities are reliant on public transportation, Lee Spruce and Blake Guyan are going to provide us some information about this.
Hello, I'm Blake Guyan.
Hi, my name is Lee Spruce from the 44th District.
Hello, I'm Blake Guyan. I use a speech device to communicate. I am wearing a dark blue shirt, black and gray tie, and glasses. I work full-time for People First of Washington and am an advocate for transportation change. I live on my own in the 28th Legislative District and have the honor to be joined by Lee.
Hi, my name is Lee Spruce. I have light brown hair, purple glasses, a green sweater with a flowered scarf, and I have a wooden background. I live in the 44th District in Snohomish County, and I sit on many committees, councils, and groups for transportation advocacy for everyone around the state. I'm employed with the Arc of Snohomish County, and I also do volunteer work.
There are many transportation challenges facing people with all kinds of disabilities in every part of our state, and we require transportation to live independently. In my previous job, I had to commute to Seattle from Pierce County several times per month. I relied on regional transit to get there. I took Sound Transit Express buses most of the time. One problem I experienced was that many of them were tour-style buses, and very poorly designed for people with disabilities who need the wheelchair lift. The process to use the lift takes about 10 minutes, which delays the bus and angers passengers for something that I do not have any control over. This problem would be solved if low-floor buses were used all of the time.
Can we share the screen of the presentation, please?
Do you mean the current PowerPoint? Is that not being able to, are you not able to view that?
I'm not able to view the text of the PowerPoint, no.
Okay, we're gonna troubleshoot in the on the background, so stay with.
Okay.
I am able to see the text.
Perfect.
Okay, but the presenter isn't.
And Lee, this is Diana. You can pull the screen that shows the text by the corner and make it bigger. Is that what you're trying to do?
It's actually not the slide that's showing right now with our photos. There was actually a text. It was actually a written out document that I thought we were going to go by.
You might have to bring that up on a separate screen or a separate computer.
Okay, I think Blake knows how to do that better than I can. I'm not as tech savvy.
Give us a few more minutes to shift it.
Hi, my friend. Why don't we go to the next speaker and you and I can chat in the background. It seems like there might have been a missing slide that didn't quite get to us, and we'll be able to catch up behind the scenes, okay?
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. Works for me. Thank you. Little nervous right now. So
You're good. You're doing great. Everyone, we got to have grace with everybody. We're all
Yeah.
going to get really good information. So I'm going to introduce Sean Latham, and he's going to talk about accessible and affordable housing.
All right. I'm going to turn off my video in that case. Is that okay?
That's perfect.
All right.
Oh. There you go. Hi, everyone.
Good evening. My name is Sean Latham from Allies in Advocacy and the Center for Independence. My preferred pronouns are he and him. To describe myself, I'm a middle-aged man with brown hair and eyes, sitting in a power wheelchair, and I have the Allies in Advocacy logo behind me. Tonight, I want to talk to you about housing. As we all know, housing prices have skyrocketed in the last few years. For example, the median price for a house went from $246,000 to $397,000 in the last decade. Rental prices have also soared upwards, with an average one-bedroom apartment in the Puget Sound going for $1,295. This means people with all different kinds of disabilities, especially those on fixed low incomes, like if they are on SSI, have to either share rent with multiple individuals, hence reducing their independence, or struggle to get on Section 8 or disability housing choice vouchers. They simply can't afford rent on their own. Then there's Section 8. After you can even get on Section 8, which takes a while, you may be waiting 2 to 3 years, or even longer for a place. And because there are so few accessible housing apartments, it can get really hard to find the right place. In fact, a recent study in 2015 showed 96% of all housing in the United States weren't accessible for those with physical impairments. So what can our state do? What steps must they take? First, our state can help support and finance more low-income housing options in all areas. Second, they could increase the number of senior and disability housing choice vouchers, so more people can get into housing, and make the Section 8 wait time shorter. And lastly, they can support and finance housing funds to make current and new housing options more accessible using a universal design approach. And now I'm going to turn it over to Heidi Hayward from Mount Vernon, who is going to share her story.
Hi there. My name is Heidi Hayward, and I am a self-advocate from Mount Vernon. I have been doing grassroots activism for about 20 years. I am a 41-year-old white woman with long dark brown hair, wearing a gray floral dress and a green vintage pendant. I am attending today from my bed, and there's a yellow wall and green and white pillows visible behind me. I became homeless in 2020 during the pandemic and the eviction moratorium. I don't see my slide up yet. Can we get that to go to the next slide? Thank you. Okay. I became homeless in 2020 during the pandemic and the eviction moratorium. I am homebound and bedbound and have a caregiver. I am very sick and there is nowhere for me to go. The programs for homelessness and affordable housing in the state are not made for people like me, so ultimately I was saved by a GoFundMe campaign. I am asking legislators to do better in the future for disabled people in need of housing. So domestic violence shelters and homeless shelters are not accessible. I was fleeing domestic violence, so I contacted a domestic violence shelter. I found out that if you have a disability and you need a caregiver or other support to assist you with daily activities, you cannot live at a domestic violence shelter. Why? Domestic violence shelters can't share their location with anyone, not even with a caregiver, for safety reasons. And homeless shelters where you must leave during the day are not accessible to people who are mostly homebound. Disabled people need more access to domestic violence shelters, not less. Severely disabled adults with caregivers do date, fall in love, cohabitate, and marry like any other adult. We also sometimes need access to domestic violence services, unfortunately. People with disabilities are more likely to experience physical and sexual violence than those without disabilities. We need support in these situations. The lack of full accessibility for disabled domestic violence victims is a glaring oversight and a violation of our rights access to all public services. Housing agencies need more resources to be fully accessible. Case managers often cut corners on access and accommodation when they have too high a caseload. We are effectively barred from access to service and support when our access needs are not honored. The eviction moratorium made the lack of affordable housing actually worse. There is a less than 1% vacancy rate in Skagit County. In Skagit County, there are 75 people competing for every rental that comes on the market. The moratorium is good for people trying to stay in their homes, but with everyone staying put, there are literally only a handful of available rentals left. People with housing grants and access needs can't compete very well in this market. There literally isn't anywhere for us to go. Counties need more money for emergency housing, especially during the pandemic. While I was homeless, I was helped in part by the Skagit County Emergency Housing Fund. When that fund ran dry, the county booted me and several other disabled people out of our emergency housing with nowhere to go in November in the cold. Please increase emergency funding during the pandemic. I have a roof over my head, but I'm still not moved into a long-term, safe, affordable home. I am accessible home. I am still waiting for my name to come up on a waiting list, and that could be a very long time. Thank you.
Hi there, we're gonna go back to the first speaker. They figured that out in the background. So Lee and Bruce.
Hello, everyone, and I apologize for the little disruption a few minutes ago. Couldn't find my part of the presentation. We're back. Thank you for bearing with us.
Uh-oh, I was not.
It can be really challenging to find somewhere to live that is affordable and can meet your transportation needs. There is a disparity between where people can afford to live and the availability of bus service. Housing in rural areas is more affordable than in cities and suburbs. Many people with disabilities are on fixed incomes and do not have resources to live next to a major bus line.
Okay. This leads to people in the community to be further isolated and not being able to live independently and live and be involved in their communities.
People with disabilities need access to accessible transportation options 24 hours per day, 7 days per week. Persons with disabilities should be able to go visit their friends and family, and participate in recreational activities. Persons with disabilities should not be limited to only medical appointments and grocery shopping outings. Before the pandemic, I went down to Lacey a few times per year to have coffee with my friends from high school. It was really fun. All persons with disabilities should be able to meet up with their friends. Now, I'm going to discuss addressing the issue through an equity framework. Transit funding relies heavily on regional sales tax. This is very problematic because sales tax is volatile. If the economy is struggling, transit agencies' revenue and services are reduced. Typically, transit service is in large metropolitan cities and on major corridors. Available, affordable, and accessible rural transportation must be provided. Transportation in all areas needs to be available when people with disabilities need it. Another problem is that Medicaid personal care only allows transportation reimbursement for medical appointments and to go to the nearest grocery store. People with disabilities should have the freedom to go where they want to. A few summers ago, one of my friends put on a comedy show in Seattle featuring performers with disabilities. Because I had access to regional, late-night transit, I could go and could access a bus back to Pierce County. However, one of my parents had to pick me up at the Tacoma Dome bus station, because buses in Pierce County do not run that late, even major routes. In a city the size of Tacoma, I should be able to access transit later in the evening. Public transportation needs to be better funded so that people like me, who rely on transit, can go out when we need to and be independent as we desire to. Now, Lee Spruce will highlight some of the other concerns that people with disabilities face regarding our current transit structure.
I've been invited to many events that are usually located down in Seattle, and I live in Snohomish County. This usually involves taking a transfer ride down, which lengthens the time that a person spends on the bus. The other problem is that some of these events that take place in Seattle end later than when the bus service is provided. Having to cut my evening short and miss out on these events because of risking having to miss the bus is limiting my ability to enjoy my life and my community.
Curb cuts with clear sidewalk markings are vital for the safety of persons with disabilities. I vote at the Pierce County Election Center in Tacoma so that I can use an accessible voting machine. The photo on the right was taken at the intersection in front of the Pierce County Election Center in Tacoma. I was trying to cross the street after getting off the bus, and 2 cars failed to yield for me after the crosswalk signal had turned green. If I hadn't looked behind me, I would have likely been hit. Sidewalk markings and other accessible infrastructure should be a priority to protect people with disabilities.
One other point that I want to make that wasn't in the presentation is sometimes, just like everybody else, you have things that come up last minute that are important. A last minute meeting to attend in person, a medical emergency, going to a medical something, say you cut your hand and you need to go get stitches. Getting transportation last minute is not available, it's not accessible and affordable for people like ourselves, again, leading to further isolation.
Well, thank you, Lee and Blake. That was a lot of good information about transportation that hopefully legislators will take to heart.
You are quite welcome. Glad to talk about it and be willing to talk to anybody in further detail if they ever wanted to.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to move on to residential supports. And we have Amal Gabrinsky, who is going to share some information about that necessity. Amal?
All right. Thank you, Diana. Good evening, everybody. My name is Amal Grabinski. And if you can see the picture, you can see that I am a round-faced woman with brown curly hair and yellow glasses. I'm in front of a blue, white, and yellow painting that says the word hope. I come to you today representing the Community Residential Services Association, which is a membership group of providers of Division of Developmental Disabilities, or Developmental Disabilities Administration funded community residential services. And we support 4,600 clients statewide in that program. So in terms of our challenges and priorities, there are 3 big ones to talk about. The first is funding for increased costs related to COVID. People receiving long-term supports have been hit hard by COVID. Direct support professionals try to keep clients physically and emotionally healthy in a time where options are limited for everyone, and they manage shifting limitations on in-home visitation and community engagement in settings whose very foundation is client choice. All indications are this pandemic is not going away anytime soon. A survey of 2020 costs for residential providers showed that an average of $11,000 per client was expended for COVID costs, and that was for personal protective equipment, for dramatically increased overtime and unemployment costs, for the cost of hotels and relocation, cleaning and sanitizing, and hazard or incentive pay for staff working with COVID positive individuals. We respectfully request consideration of extending this funding through the pandemic to help keep our services and our communities stable. Next topic is wage stabilization. We all know that the biggest driver of quality services in our sector is access to trained and skilled direct support professionals who develop relationships with the individuals that they support. We know that the biggest barrier to quality service is the turnover rate in our sector. In 2020, turnover in community residential services was at or above 50%. The continual loss of people who are familiar with the client's needs, communication, wants, and behavior patterns is devastating to the client, the family, and the stability of the setting. In 2020, the statewide minimum wage was $13.50, but the income needed to be self-sufficient statewide to be able to afford rent or a place to live or to buy food was $17.42, a full 25% higher than minimum wage. Knowing this, it shouldn't surprise anybody that direct support professionals across the state need to work multiple jobs and work overtime just to be able to afford a place to live. As part of our ask this year, again, we respectfully request an increase to the vendor rate in 2022 to allow providers to at least keep ahead of rising minimum wage and to help stabilize staffing levels when we're out of the pandemic. Finally, supporting people to live in communities of their choosing. We know that there are a lack of options for many, many people who experience intense behaviors or who have intense medical needs. We need to consider expansion of behavioral health crisis teams and the use of strike team models to help provide targeted supports to keep clients in their homes. We need the continued development of wraparound options that partner with residential providers to keep people in their homes and in the community. And we need greater access to trained non-police responders when we have clients in crisis. We know it's more costly to provide services to individuals with higher needs, but any cuts that potentially displace individuals who need intense services to be able to live in the community is a devastating impact and one that we can't support. While these are our key legislative priorities for the next session, they are not our only priorities. First off, speaking about the affordable housing crisis, both individuals with disabilities and direct support professionals are often unable to secure housing in communities of their choosing, where they work, where they have community and family, due to the overwhelming lack of affordable options. With the creation of affordable housing options in our communities, we have the opportunity to reduce a significant stressor and to create improved services through reduced staff turnover. Secondly, individuals experiencing disability are almost twice as likely to live in poverty than those who don't experience disability. Living in poverty limits the range of choices and opportunities that individuals have to be full members of their communities, playing in, living in, working in, and socializing in the same places that their non-disabled peers do. We need to be able to make meaningful change to this fundamental inequity. And to my final point, we need to acknowledge that the majority of individuals who work supporting people with disabilities are women of color. A high percentage of that number is comprised of women who are immigrants, who use English as a second or third language, who are primary caregivers for children or elders in multi-generational households, and who are disproportionately impacted by the changes in school, daycare, and work brought about by COVID. It is a decidedly unequal sharing of work. In a situation where the housing, pay, and equity impacts are stacked against the core of our workforce, it's incumbent upon all of us to do all that we can to call out this inequity and actively work to correct it. As we do, we honor the individuals that we support by committing to developing inclusive and equitable communities that benefit all of us and to help build a better, stronger community for all Washingtonians. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much, Amel. That was wonderful. And it shows we really have some needs that need to be addressed this session with legislators. So next we're going to move on to the topic of employment. And people with disabilities are quite capable of holding a job and contributing to our economy. And Ivanova Smith is a stellar example. So let's listen as she shares about employment.
Hello, my name is Ivanova Smith, and I'm an activist advocate for At Work and chair of Self Advocates in Leadership SAIL. I have brown hair, olive skin, and I'm wearing a black suit jacket with a gray tie and checkered shirt. And behind in my background is a message: eliminate some minimum wage for people with disabilities. And it has a $sign in green of circle. Workers with disabilities need to be paid equitably and at least minimum wage. We also need to make sure that there's no abuse and neglect in the workplace for workers with disabilities. And workers with disabilities should all getting restricted in their ability to work because of COVID. Because many people with disabilities are underemployed or unemployed, many are forced to stay in poverty and not paid equitable wages. Income caps on SSI or SSDI could also hinder our right to the hours we want to work. Many supports are tied to Medicaid, and we want to make sure that workers with disabilities keep their support even if they want to work more hours. I have my personal story. In my first job, I worked in a segregated job as a KitchenAid on a military base. And it was one of the worst experiences of my life. I got abused in that job, and it took a whole year for me to get out of it because I did not know about my rights back then. Many workers with disabilities don't know that they have the right to not experience harassment and discrimination in the workplace. And so we need to work better at making sure that people are not being abused in the workplace. The photo you see is a photo when I got my first paycheck. Being paid it felt really empowering. And I thought, I'm contributing to my community and I'm getting compensated for that. And that made me excited. And people with disabilities, we want to work. We want to feel that accomplishment and that we're contributing. And so it's important that we are paid equitably for our wages, but that all jobs do not, it's also important that we don't get abused in the workplace. I now in a job that I absolutely love. I work for the UW Lead and at work, and both those employers are in the community. I'm not segregated anymore. I work alongside disabled and non-disabled people. And it's really important that we get to have work that is meaningful and it supports us as people and not segregate us. And so thank you for hearing me, and please support Senate Bill 5284 to end some minimum wage. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivanova. You're very passionate about working, and it comes through. So next, we're going to hear a little bit about community access. And Karen Atwood and Deborah Kahn are going to reveal some of the barriers that people with disabilities face when they're trying to access their community.
Hello, everyone. Hi, my name is Karen Atwood, president of the Washington State Association for the Deaf. And I'm speaking for the deafblind, hard of hearing, people with deaf disabilities, Deaf Plus. I want to emphasize on the culture, the way of living, the way of their life, and how we communicate. I want to emphasize that. Thank you so much to the Governor Inslee for being able to provide sign language interpreters every time we have a press conference with COVID to make those announcements. One thing we do need to work on is to provide captioning as well for our hard of hearing folks out there. I want to emphasize that. Now, the topic of culture, language, auditory barriers, that's what I want to discuss. Medical, behavioral care within the healthcare system that is really poorly accessible. We need to vastly improve that. To have fluency for medical and mental health interpreters, qualified caregivers, case managers, advocates, we need to have more of that. Adult family homes. Adult family homes are not 100% accessible, such as staff having the communication needs to be able to accommodate the needs of the clients. It's very restricted. It's limited. We also need the communication technology, like the FM loop. FM loops are used for hard of hearing people. We need to be able to support each other for when they want to go and socialize. We don't have any of that in place. Who are they able to communicate? We need to accommodate their communication needs for interactions. Nursing homes, assisted living, family and group homes, senior citizen living. They're lonely and isolated. They're alienated. There's no one to be able to communicate with. Can you imagine? Psychological, mental health, the emotional impact. The assessments all done really can lead to misdiagnosis. All those people with a hearing loss are misunderstood, their communication, and because of that, they could be placed in the wrong location. And that could damage and is very harmful to that person and to those individuals. Policies for the public events, the announcements from the legislators and from the governor's office. They really need to vastly include to be more inclusive for everyone. Having somebody up there on the screen talking, I'm lost. Or on, you know what, I don't know what they're talking about. There's no captioning. I don't have an interpreter. I'm lost. I don't know what's going on. There's lots of different levels. We're talking statewide, agencies, the government, education, legal, healthcare. There's not enough inclusion to have equal access for everyone. How can we solve this? What can we do? Accept the fact that communication, accessibility, and the access, it's not cheap. I know. It can be costly. But that should not be something to remove the communication access because you're looking at the budget. Now, I ask what any of the state agencies, advocate services, those who are asking for money, please, please include that for communication accessibility for all. The deaf community, the deaf blind, the hard of hearing community, really, we want them to feel included, to be inspired, to be on the same field as everyone else, to be equal. Thank you so much. We'll go ahead and hand that over to Deborah. I'm looking for the slide. Can we change the slide, please? Perfect. Thank you so much. Hi, this is Deborah. I'm the president of Washington State Deafblind Citizens. I'm white. I have a blue collar turtleneck and a black cardigan on. Got a dark blue background. Got short brown hair and purple glasses. I am deafblind myself, and I have a communication facilitator who's here with me right now. Just showed her hand on the screen with me. The deafblind community at large has been frustrating. It's been frustrating for us. For example, we're frustrated we don't have enough qualified interpreters who know and understand and have the skills to be able to understand the deafblind culture and the communication needs. For example, I'm going to share a personal story. Now, I had a doctor's appointment that I went to. Now, again, it was an urgent care that I went to. And I know sometimes they end up using what they call as a video relay service interpreter. We'll call that VRI. And to be able to use that, well, I use tactile to be able to communicate with somebody, having their hand under my hand to understand and communicate. I need a live interpreter. But me as a deaf-blind person, I'm not be able to access using the VRI. So that's where the medical facilitator would be helpful, so I can have full communication access to what's going on. Now, our daily lives, there are so many crosswalks and intersections. They have a button where you can go ahead and push a signal to be able to cross the street. But quite often, they're not accessible for the deaf-blind because it doesn't vibrate. How are we to know? If it vibrates, that's actually what called is an accessible pedestrian signal. We call that APS. I wish that could be located at every intersection statewide to be safe for us to be able to cross the street. Some neighborhoods, they don't even have sidewalks. And I don't even feel safe to be able to walk in those areas, to be freely to walk in the community. It limits us to where we can choose to live. There are other needs that we need for the deaf-blind who are 55 and older. They need to have access to Braille. Braille lists, computer training, Braille technology. They need training in that. But again, 55 and over, they're not looking for work, but there's no funding to be able to cover that type of services because they're not looking for employment. We need that for our community. There's a few solutions. I want you legislators to think about being able to access money in the budget for communication access needs. You can't prohibit those kind of costs, and really depends on us to pay for it or others. We're on low income. We can't afford that. So if you could please consider to be involved in part of this, I encourage you to go ahead and be involved in our community. Come out and meet our deafblind individuals. Come meet us. The Americans with Disability Act, the ADA, we have been struggling for quite some time to be inclusive for support service providers, SSP. SSP makes things accessible for us. For instance, if we want to go to the grocery store, or if we want to go shopping, looking for clothes, go to doctor's appointments. The federal government thinks SSP is considered more of a caregiver or caretaker. It's not. They only provide communication access and visual information. That way we have our autonomy so we can decide what do we need to do? What do we want to go shopping for? That's SSP. That's one. Another one is medical communicating facilitator, which is also included with the Americans with Disabilities Act, is to be able to facilitate communication. And thirdly, I'd like to encourage you legislators to think about changing the ADA. We've been struggling for a long time to add to it. I hope you legislators can be able to be part of that and help make a change for the best. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you to Karen and Deborah. That was eye-opening in a lot of ways, and I hope
That was wonderful.
that legislators have picked up on some of these great needs that really haven't been talked about. We're going to move on to behavioral health, which has been a huge topic within the legislature over the last few years. And it especially is true for children and adults with disabilities. It was even critical before the pandemic started, and now more so. Rochelle Madigan is going to expand on this issue for us.
Thanks so much. Hi, everybody. My name is Rochelle Madigan. I am a 40-year-old Caucasian woman. I am a maroon top. I have bluish green eyes and reddish brown curly hair. I have a few scattered grays here and there that I have earned the hard way because I have 8 children. One of my children, Christian, is a 13-year-old male with autism. Christian's complex mental illness and disabilities have made him a chronic danger to himself almost his entire life. Because of this, my family has used nearly every children's behavioral health service offered in our state, including 2 stays in the highest level of care for kids, the Children's Long-Term Inpatient Program, or CLIP, as well as a failed community-based group home placement that ended with countless injuries to himself and community members, and his being boarded in an emergency room for 6 weeks while he was waiting for an inpatient bed to open up. While advocating for Christian over time, I became kind of an accidental advocate for other families whose children, like mine, make up the most complex and expensive children's behavioral health cases in our state. Through my volunteer work as a family advocate, I have helped many families navigate our complex and often inadequate systems. These are families who endure horrific events every day in their homes while their suicidal and homicidal children are not getting their needs met. They suffer severe injury, job loss, property destruction, and legal expenses. They are blamed by the professionals they reach out to for help, and even advised to legally abandon their other children for safety because no placements can be found for kids with severe behavior disturbances. Their need to find appropriate resources are literally a matter of life and death in their homes every single day. For these children who present immediate danger to self and others and who have exhausted all community-based services, the only options are CLIP, which has long wait lists and is a 6 to 12-month maximum program, out-of-state treatments, or waiting for their behaviors to finally be severe enough that they end up incarcerated or dead. I want each of you right now who has a child to imagine looking into your own child's face. Now imagine your child has a disability, and that these are the options you must choose between for them. Because of the lack of intensive residential treatment options in Washington, we spend between $200,000 and $400,000 per year per child who is sent out of state for treatment. Meanwhile, a 2020 Mental Health America nationwide ranking for youth behavioral health lists Washington as 43 out of 51, indicating Washington has among the highest level of need with some of the lowest access to care. A couple of years ago, I began asking families who reach out to me for help with these complex cases I've been speaking of to share a bit of their testimony so that decision makers could begin to see the prevalence of this issue as well as the horrific traumas these families are facing. To date, I have collected over 50 pages of tear-jerking testimonies from families across the state. Families like Anna McCartney and her daughter Olivia, who are shown on the slide. After exhausting the few intensive supports offered in our state, Olivia became suicidal one evening. When her family tried to stop her from harming herself, she assaulted them all intensely. Because of the imminent danger, their only option was to call police. Olivia, who is a 15-year-old person of color, spent the night in juvie. Only after her mother's advocacy with legislators was she released to Seattle Children's, where she was boarded for weeks before being sent out of state treatment, where she still is. I have helped families whose children were boarded for months while waiting for beds. ERs are beginning to tire of boarding all these kids indefinitely. They're turning more and more families away with no safety net but our grossly inadequate wraparound system. We already know that people of color disproportionately struggle with access to behavioral health care and have a higher rate of incarceration. So our lack of intensive residential and long-term treatment options is only perpetuating these inequities. In the midst of their ordeal, Anna poignantly said this, and I quote, "The thing I can't get past in all this, we have every possible privilege here. I only work part-time and I took this year off due to her illness. I have done everything anyone can think of, hired all the best, horse therapy, therapists, in-home behavioral help, concierge case manager, amazing care team, wraparound, C-Corps, DD, crisis line, etc. If I can't make it work despite unbelievable privilege, I can't even imagine how this is for families who face obstacles when they try to get help. This state needs to change our mental health system," end quote. We tout ourselves as being a progressive state. Our families deserve to rank higher in our nation than 43rd when it comes to getting our kids help. Other states where we now send our most behaviorally challenged kids are providing intensive residential treatments and doing them well. Unfortunately, sending Washington's kids to these places effectively separates them from their natural support systems, which is just an added layer of trauma and a barrier to recovery. I believe with policy changes, a sense of urgency, accountability, we can save a lot of money as a state by meeting the needs of our own kids in our own state. Our children deserve better hopes for their future than what we are offering. I urge you to recognize that residential behavioral health resources are an appropriate and very needed part of helping our kids with the highest level of need. When we create intensive residential resources in Washington, we will save money, reduce wait lists for lower level resources, increase equity and positive life outcomes, decrease trauma to families, and bring a lifeline of hope to our children and families who need it so desperately. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Rochelle. I think that was heartbreaking to anybody listening. Thank you for what you do with your 8 kids and for all the families that you're trying to help as well. So our last topic tonight goes on personal care. People with disabilities often need some assistance with personal care tasks. Karina Fail is here tonight to tell you why this service is so important.
Hi, I'm Karina Fail. I have dark brown hair. I have a red top on with white beads on it, and I use an electric wheelchair, and I normally have glasses on, but they're broken. In our state, we have over 21,000 people on DDA that receive DDA home care services, and over 90% of those people still live at home with their families. It is also really hard to find good quality care providers that can handle the needs that people might have, such as hard abusive behavior and physical barriers that might be hard to find someone that might be able to use Hoyer lifts and other types of equipment. So some solutions to that stuff that I just mentioned are like having more accessible housing options that are easier for people who use wheelchairs to access, having care providers that have more training, have more training for difficult clients, so that they're able to give them the proper supports that they need, and then pay more wages to care providers, higher wages, so that there's not such a turnover. And have a little bit more of have some more accountability for providers as well. Thank you. I cut that a little shorter because I thought we were running out of time. So thank you very much.
Well,
I would
thank
be
you.
happy to expand if you need more information.
Thank you, Karina, for sharing. That's going to wrap up our presentation piece about the different topics. And so I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy Norton-Paul, and he's going to take some questions and answers right now.
Thank you so much, Diana. My name is Jeremy Norton-Paul, and for those of you who I haven't met yet, I am the Executive Director of the Washington State Developmental Disabilities Council. I'm a white man in my mid-30s with brown hair parted to the side, with clear framed glasses and an olive green shirt. I am going to also allow my co-facilitator, Elizabeth Gordon, to introduce herself, and then we will talk about how this is going to go.
Hi, everybody. My name is Elizabeth Gordon. I'm the Executive Director for the Governor's Committee on Disability Issues and Employment. I have short reddish hair with gray highlights. I'm in my mid-50s and I'm wearing a black sweater with a little bit of a clip on the side. I'm really happy to be here this evening.
Okay, so this is Jeremy speaking again. This is the first time that we have ever done this event virtually through a webinar, and so I am so pleased that everyone's been able to participate and present. It's been fantastic. So now we have some time to ask our questions to the legislators who are here in attendance. And so if you have a question, please use the Q&A button. It's at the bottom of your screen to type in your question. If you prefer to ask your question verbally by phone, there's a phone number on the screen you can call. It's 360-830-8613. We're going to do our best to get to as many questions as possible, but there's a lot of people here, so please don't be upset if we're not able to address your question. And we highly encourage you to contact your legislators to make sure that you have a chance to share your questions and concerns with them directly. And so I'm going to take a look at the question box here. And well, first, let me also just say, if you're a legislator here and you hear a question or a comment that you would like to address, what you'll need to do is raise your hand. There's a button that says raise hand. And if you do that, we'll be able to unmute you so that you can share your response. And just let us know if you have any issues with that. You can also type in the chat box. So I'm looking at Clarence's question in the chat box about bringing funding and transportation and other kinds of resources to people with disabilities in Washington. And I'm thinking back to a lot of the presentations tonight, and a lot of them have had a common theme, and that is resources, and that there are not enough resources to go around to make sure that all people, including people with disabilities, have what they need to live good lives in the community. And so there are some people who say that we need more resources through tax reform or some other method. There are some people say that we have enough resources, but we need to distribute them more fairly, more equitably, or maybe the answer is both. And so one question we have for any legislator who wants to answer is, what do you think that we can do? What must we do to make sure that there are adequate resources for the entire disability community in Washington State? So go ahead and raise your hand if you'd like to address that, and we will unmute you. Give it a minute here. Okay, we see someone with a raised hand. Thanks for your patience.
Dan, you should be able to speak now.
Okay, go ahead.
Hi, Dan Bernowski. I'm out in the 28th, and I serve on the Transportation Committee. Full disclosure, I'm really new to transportation, but I understand the role and importance that it plays when it comes to mobility. And what I've heard tonight is that there's a lack of resources and infrastructure, and I agree. And that, I believe, is going to be, it's a challenge to continue to expand that infrastructure. but I feel confident in saying that this is something that the Transportation Committee is hopefully looking to address when it comes to expanding that infrastructure and making sure that those resources are in place and doing it in an equitable manner. So, you know, one project specifically that I can think of, and, you know, I know this is a statewide panel tonight, is the BRT in Pierce County. So that's the bus rapid transport or transit that Pierce Transit runs, that goes up and down Pack Avenue, all the way from Spanaway to downtown Tacoma. And the idea is it's accessible. I mean, it's readily accessible to where someone could be able to hop on the bus relatively quickly compared to, you know, having the bus, lower itself and then have people take the time to hop on. Like, it's already at level. So the idea is it's more accessible, it's more rapid, it prioritizes bus traffic over regular vehicle traffic, so that way we can continue to get to where we need to go more quickly. And, you know, I think that's important for Pierce County because we have access to, you know, medical facilities up and down the Pack Ave corridor. It gets us to where we need to go to work. A lot of us live up and down that corridor. So I think, you know, that's a good initial start and a good initial investment. Actually, that's something that's been worked on for a long time. And that's going to be, you know, one of our priorities moving forward. And, you know, that's just one small piece. And I don't want to take up too much of your time. But I think, you know, those infrastructure improvements and maintaining current infrastructure is key to those accessibility issues. And hopefully that answered your question. I didn't mean to talk too much.
Thank you so much for the response. And we're keeping an eye out if there are any other folks who have their hand raised who want to address the question before we move on to the next one. Looks like there might be one more.
You should be able to speak now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
We can, thank you.
Okay. This is State Senator Steve Conway, and I would just, this is a big question you have asked. I should let you know the Senate just got off the floor. We were in session up until about 5 minutes ago, and some of us need to eat here, so we may not be able to stick around, but I want to say this. You know, we have always had a phrase in my mind about our need to fund adequate resources for the disability community. And it goes back to a phrase that was used by one of our great leaders, keep the promise. And of course, you know, the budget was in the last few years before that we faced this the crisis with the coronavirus. We were making some progress to improving and lessening those who are on the waiting list for services. I think we need to move more quickly with that need to ensure all those families who are on the waiting list can get coverage through the state. And I think that the trouble, as we all know, is that we have a very difficult tax system in this state. The budget tends to fluctuate. And as a result of that, some years we can do more than we can others. So I think, you know, there are a couple of issues in the legislature right now that I'm sure the disabled community is aware of, is the tax reform group that's working on trying to change the tax structure in the state so our revenues are not so volatile. That alone will help us keep the promise that we all have made to the disabled community. And I just would say this, that you have a large group of, I see Diane Stodden here, and Diane's a constituent of mine and a great friend, and we will continue to keep the promise and work at creating the environment we need to help our disabled families. They are the real heroes of our community. So thank you for this forum.
Thank you, Senator Conway. And just a reminder, if you're not a legislator, please don't put your hand up. You can type your question in the question and answer box. So just for legislators, hands up.
This is Jeremy Norton-Paul. Thank you, Senator Conway, and thank you also for introducing yourself at the beginning. Just a reminder to folks to announce who you are when you're speaking. That'll help people. And so let's go ahead, and Elizabeth is going to ask our next question. Elizabeth, you're on mute.
Good heavens, there you go. Thank you. So looking at Jill's question and reflecting back on some of the questions that we had that were submitted during our registration process, Jill specifically is asking about requiring private insurance companies to have coverage for children's hearing aid. And we also have heard through some of our presentations today that we really are lacking inadequate resources to be able to get basic communication needs for people. And so we'd really love to hear from the elected officials, their stances on that and their approaches. I see Shelley Kloba has her hand up.
You should be able to speak now, Shelley.
Okay, great. Are you hearing me okay? Perfect. Yes, this is Representative Shelley Kloba. I represent the 1st Legislative District that's centered around Bothell and has some parts of Montlake Terrace and Kirkland, Olive Briar, and parts of unincorporated South Snohomish County. And thank you, Jill, for asking that question about the private insurance companies having or being required to provide coverage for children's hearing aids. Knowing what we know about the developing brain from birth to 5, that time is so crucial for children to be hearing as best they possibly can. So I was very happy to see that you mentioned in your question the bill that Representative Emily Wicks has brought forward. It's House Bill 1047. And I signed on to support it. I wish I'd had that great idea, but I want to ask folks to maybe give a little bit of a nudge. It has been referred to Healthcare and Wellness, and it would be good to create a little bit more awareness among your state legislators, my colleagues, and kind of help to put a little pressure behind that. I think it's something that we could and should do. And in fact, when I read the bill, I called my niece who lives in Illinois, whose son had hearing loss in one ear that they were able to discover when he was very young. And she actually had quite a good experience with the services that she was provided in Illinois as a low income, single parent. And so it really kind of makes me mad because I grew up in Illinois and I moved here and I love Washington and it's my home. And I want it to be, giving the best possible opportunities to all of our citizens. And this is one way that we can do that. So I'm in support of it. And thanks for the advocacy about that, Jill.
Thank you.
Representative Bruns. Oh.
Yep, Representative Brunsky, please.
Thank you. Sorry, his hand went down. There you go, my friend. You're able to speak now.
Hi. Can you hear me now? Sorry. I had to press the button a couple extra times. Yeah, Dan Bernowski here in the 28th, which I should have spoken earlier, covers, Tacoma, University Place, Fircrest, Lakewood, Stillicum, DuPont, JBLM, and parts of unincorporated Pierce County. Yeah, I'm proud to have helped co-sponsor this did I go for this one? I'm sorry. I got lost in the bills, but yeah, hearing is obviously important. So just on a technical aspect, I was getting a briefing from staff that if we were to, we couldn't have it work with just children. It would have to apply to the population as a whole. So just something, you know, as we advocate for this, because I still think it's important to keep that in mind and to pass that on to fellow legislators that, you know, there's a lot of people, regardless of age, that, you know, require hearing aid devices. So I think, you know, like I said before, as we advocate for this issue, you know, we'll need to include that narrative to let fellow legislators understand that, yeah, it's very important for children to have access to hearing aids, but also it's important for everyone, regardless of what their age, to include seniors. I mean, I think there's studies that show that, you know, lack of hearing for seniors can help lead to dementia issues, which is something that we obviously want to prevent, and you know, they're expensive. I mean, it's a huge equity issue to not have providers include this in their coverage. So anyway, I just wanted to chime in on the technical piece there, and let's continue to move this forward because it's very important. Thank you.
This is Jeremy speaking. Thank you, Representative Bronski, for your response. I'm going to ask a question about housing. As we've heard from several presenters tonight and many other folks across the community, we know that having access to safe, affordable, accessible housing is a really big challenge. It's a fundamental human need, and we see time and time again that when people do not have access to housing that they can afford and access, that they end up in hospitals, they end up homeless, they end up sick, and other very poor negative situations. And so we're wondering, what do you think are some of the ideas or solutions to making sure that all people, especially people with disabilities, have access to safe, affordable, accessible housing? I see that Representative Bronski has his hand up again.
You should be able to speak, Representative Bronski.
Sorry about that. Can you hear me okay now? Okay. Still learning how to Zoom, even though we've been on Zoom for, it seems like, over a year. Yeah, I don't mean to be taking other legislators' times. I'm not sure who's still here, and I don't want to step on any toes. I'm not a housing expert, but we have some great advocates and housing experts in our caucus in the House that are doing a combination of policies that will allow for increased housing stock, affordability measures, and a whole gamut of other ways to address this issue, because it is absolutely a critical issue for our region right now. So again, you know, if there's any other legislators here, I don't mean to step on your toes and keep speaking, but yeah, I agree. I mean, housing affordability is huge right now, and it always has been. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see that Senator Conway also has his hand raised. So go ahead, sir.
I just want to point out that, you know, the governor had in his budget additional dollars for the Housing Trust Fund. The Housing Trust Fund has been a critical program in our communities for building housing. And I think that, I'm not sure what we've done, but we do target groups for housing. So it may be that we need to create a spot for disabled families and disabled individuals in terms of our Housing Trust Fund. And so I am all in favor of that. I think we recognize we're both trying to pass some bills to give local authorities more tax breaks in building housing. But I do believe that we need to do some targeting here so that our disability community is benefits from the dollars we're putting into the Housing Trust Fund. Thank you.
I see that Shelley Kloba has your hand raised, so go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Again, Shelley Kloba, representing the 1st Legislative District. So I do appreciate the comments that Senator Conway just had about the increased funding for the Housing Trust Fund. And that is about building new housing. And that's a really important thing. But I'm also concerned about preserving what we currently have in our housing stock that is affordable or close to affordable. And so I had put in the chat a link to House Bill 1035. And it's essentially, we call it Renters Relief Bill because it incentivizes property owners to keep their rents in the affordable range. And the way this looks with a little more specificity is if it is a multi-family unit, so apartment building of some sort that is 25 years or older, and you offer any of the units that are affordable for a person who makes up to 50% of the area median income, then you as the property owner would get a tax break on your property tax for that portion of the property that's represented by that either 1 or 5 or 8, however many units that you are offering at that affordable level. Same thing goes for manufactured home parks where the space underneath your manufactured home is something that you are renting from the park. If that rent is offered again at up to 50% AMI, then you get a tax break on the portion of the park that is comprised of those pads that you're offering at that lower price. And then the third aspect of it, because I know a lot of times single family home neighborhoods, we need to do some densification. We need to have more people living in there. But there's sometimes some resistance to putting in a lot of real dense housing and apartment homes and things. So this bill addresses it by offering that same kind of property tax incentive for the portion of your residential property that is offered as a affordable to up to 80% AMI. And so that, if you could think of like a backyard cottage, or maybe you've remodeled your daylight basement to be a separate housing unit. If you're offering that at that 80% or up to 80% area median income affordability level, you'll get the discount on your property taxes for that. So it incentivizes property owners to offer their units at an affordable rent, and it preserves what we already have. I even like it in terms of for seniors who maybe are starting to realize they have more house than they really need. They could do some modifications, turn their part of their home into an accessory dwelling unit, and then they would have, a source of income and a decrease on their property taxes. So it feels like a win-win all around. It isn't something that's specifically tailored to the disability community, but I do see that it could potentially be helpful.
Thank you so much for your response. I think we have one more time for one more question from Elizabeth, and then we'll have some closing messages for you.
Excellent. Well, I've seen a trend of a number of different people asking questions around people who are dealing with traumatic brain injuries, and the fact that often this is a population that is overlooked, and that because of the complexity to some of the application procedures for getting services. People really struggle to be able to get connected because they need the support to be able to do the application, and yet the support isn't available. And so one of the things that people would like to hear is if there are ideas about ways to provide additional support to this population that's often overlooked, including one person asked specifically about training for care providers in traumatic brain injury. Representative Bronski?
Yeah, thank you. Full disclosure, I guess the way I answered this question is I don't know. And this is where I need your help to be advocates for TBI folks, and just, you know, reach out to my office and certainly reach out to fellow legislators to provide suggestions on how to better serve this community. So you know, I'm again, I have no shame in saying I know what I don't know, and this is something I don't know. So that's, you know, what I have to say. That's how I'm answering the question. So thank you.
Absolutely. Representative Kloba.
Yes, thank you. And I just want to commend my colleague, my new colleague, Representative Bernowski, who is a quick study. And I know this from being an advocate for children, that you have to ask the experts. You have to know what you don't know and ask the experts. And honestly, you guys are the experts when it comes to how public policy affects, you know, yourselves, your family member, your community, and we need to hear from you. So I am eternally grateful for this kind of, you know, you guys do a thing every year, a reception down in the rotunda, underneath the rotunda there, and that's helpful. And I honestly, this has been a really great venue for this, because I feel like I've been able to talk to so many people, and I usually have to kind of focus on one or two or three. So, you know, this might not have been what, you know, you would have wished, but silver lining, I think this is really helpful. But back to the question about TBI. I am a former healthcare provider, and over time, there are things that have been added onto our licensure to that we have to have credits in those particular areas in order to renew our license. And so I don't know enough about the licensing or training for the kinds of care providers who, the DPAs, but it would seem like if that's something we decide is important and has value, which I think all of this community would say, yes, indeed, you know, if you can help legislators understand what that is like to have a care provider who isn't trained well enough in delivering the specialty care that's involved with someone with a traumatic brain injury, you know, help us understand from your perspective and your expert point of view. And maybe there's a way we can get that added on to the training for folks to increase the professionalization also of that job category.
Excellent, thank you. Senator Conway.
You know, I think, as Representative Kloba has said what I would have said, but I want to add a couple more possibilities here to help people. Every community has a committee on aging and disability. It's under the guise of the Department of Social and Health Services. So if the traumatic brain injury people don't believe that there's adequate service providers, they should take that concern to the area councils on aging and disability and begin a dialogue with them about trying to ensure, and I go back to Representative Kloba's idea, to ensure that we have the training that our home care providers have, the training in this area of traumatic brain injury. I've been on a task force for 3 years now working on long-term care workforce issues because the TBI people are often clients of our long-term care industry. And so there is a lot of discussion going inside the home care industry, the Training Institute for Home Care Workers, about training people to address the acuity of their patients. And I think that obviously these patients have a high acuity and probably need, as Representative Klobas suggested, some specialized training in this arena. So I think we can find a solution to this if we work, as Senator Klobas suggested, with our players in our community. And I really think the Area Council on Aging and Disability is often a good beginning point to kind of address some of these issues. Thank you. And thank you for this forum. I miss our meeting in the dome there in the basement, and the many people who were there, many legislators who were there. And I think, you know, this is a great forum. We should probably try some of these during outside the session as well as during the session so that we can make sure that we communicate with more legislators and we hear more of the needs that you have. But thank you, everyone. I'm going to have to leave here, but I know we're near the ending time anyway, but thank you for all your work. You are truly the heroes.
Thank you, Senator Conway. This is Jeremy speaking. We so appreciate you and the other legislators who took the time to be here and address questions. And a few things that I wanted to say before I hand it over to Deborah Awillo for final remarks. One is that a reminder that this is being recorded, and we will share a link that you can share with others in your community and your legislators to continue the conversation. We're also saving all of your questions and chats in the chat box, and so we'll have a record of that. And so we know that this is a very short period of time, but it's certainly not the end of the conversation. So I'm going to hand it over to Deborah Awillo, who is going to share some closing remarks before we say goodnight.
Okay, hello, making sure the interpreter can see me okay. Perfect. Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. My name is Deborah. This is my sign name. I'm sorry, something was just moving there. But this is my sign name, D on the forehead. I'm wearing a flowered shawl, a black turtleneck, glasses. I have some blue glasses, blue and black glasses, a green plant behind me, a snake plant. And I hope that you can see me clearly in my sign language. Everything looks good. My video looks okay. I'm reading the captioning and I realized they're captioning what I'm signing. So that threw me off there for a minute. I thought someone else was talking, but no, that's me through my interpreter. So I'm here to wrap up. Everything that we've heard tonight was very powerful. Our community members, the panelists, the stories they share, the legislators, their suggestions. Thank you so much for everyone showing up tonight. From what I watched tonight, we have seven different priorities, and all of those priorities and watching those laid out, there was quite a few. I just want to wrap them up. We talked about the theme of tonight, I think that we saw was safety. We talked a lot about livelihoods and making a livelihood independently. Stability, that's very important, we recognize tonight. Accessibility, and being autonomous is very important to us. And out in the cities, the urban areas, out in the rural areas as well. Independence, top priority, communication, support, and involving the community and working together. Inclusion, very important. Equity, choice. That was a common theme that I noticed tonight. Many of us talked about that priority. The issues that we face and those barriers are related to funding, timing, and the scarcity of services. I think funding and timing and lack of services really do impact how we can thrive. People without disabilities and people with disabilities are the same. We have the same needs. We need to work with the resources that we have to support our lives so that we can thrive. That's what I took from tonight. And these panelists that spoke shared and exposed and really disclosed a lot of their experiences. And we were able to see these barriers and the needs that are out there. We've communicated with you, with our legislators, and we've taken this all in. And I hope going forward that we can all work together, and legislators as well, and hoping that we can help each other and help our communities, and we can all work together and dialogue and support and be creative and use these resources in the best way possible. And disability, of course, does require funding, and people think, oh, it requires money. And that's true. But so what? That's what we need. We need the support. We need this resources. We need increase in funding and affordable housing. These are everything that we need, and it does rely on funding. Disability should not be the reason to be a barrier for funding. So tonight, I think we heard loud and clear that funding was a priority, and time is very important. And I'm not talking about the concept of each person had 5 minutes to talk. I'm talking about hearing people's stories and feeling like you have to rush through things. And people have to rush to get to the bus, or they feel rushed getting on the bus, or meetings are limited and they can't see the interpreter. And because of the communication requires additional time to be able to have that equal access. Switching from interpreter to interpreter takes time, and we have to catch what the other person said. It's all about time. It takes time to understand the issues at hand. It takes time to understand what disability is. As the senator just talked about TBI and not knowing exactly what is needed, it takes time to learn that. Please do take the time to learn about TBI, what it means. Make time to learn about the various disabilities and their needs. Disability is not just people that live with disabilities. It does not mean that they cannot do things. They can. What they need is time, funding, and plenty of resources. And that's equitable. We need to be equitable with everyone. It's called equity. And that's our goal. So tonight, when it comes 40 years ago, Toby Olson established this reception. We needed a place to talk about disabilities. That was 40 years ago. And it was in a hotel, and there was food provided. And now here we are, 40 years later, and we're still here. You're all still here. And we're here. We're not giving up. We still showed up, and we will continue to do that for the next 40 years. And maybe we'll see some big improvements with time, funding, and having all of the resources that we need in healthcare, in education, in housing for everyone. Thank you for coming tonight. I really do appreciate it. It means a lot. Our hats go off to everyone. Big kudos. And thank you for the committee and everyone that disclosed their personal stories, all the hard work that went in to make this virtual event possible. Thank you, everyone. I really do appreciate it. Thank you to the interpreters. Thank you to the cart provider. And thank you to the communications facilitator. Even though we didn't see you on camera, we know you're out there. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thank you so much, everybody. We are going to be concluding this by ending the webinar. As a reminder, it is going to be sent to you in a link. However, a more refined video will be posted and shared as well. That's edited and making sure that all the relevant information is captured. Thank you so much. This was powerful. I, for one, learned a lot, and I appreciate everyone's testimonials. Thank you so much.